Hello, and thanks again for choosing to use StartSmart. We're on the home page right now, and what I'm going to do today is log in and show you how to create records. You should have received your login information via email, so go to the left-hand side of the page, type in your information, and let's get started. Once you log in, it brings you to a page called the dashboard. Now, what you'll see on the dashboard is a series of graphs, and what these graphs are a visual representation of the data that you've entered relating to salary, revenue, expense, cash flow, the balance sheet, as well as the income statement. You'll see all of the graphs loading right here. This is some test data that I've entered for the months of January 2011 all the way through June of 2011. What I'm going to do with you first is navigate the toolbar. You have the dashboard, which is the page that we're on, the salary document, revenue, expense, cash flow, the balance sheet, the income statement, as well as the help documents. Within the help documents, you can find the online user guide. You can download the user guide, as well as gain access to other helpful resources. You also have the My Account button, where you can go and change your personal information or your password, and then you can also choose to log out. The first record that we're going to work on today is the salary records, or are the salary records, excuse me. So this is the salary dashboard. Now the basic format of the dashboard remains consistent for each of the different records that we're going to create today. Here, under the date column, it shows us the date for which the particular record has been created. We have in use. This shows us whether or not the document is in use by another user for whom we have created an account. We have last modified. It shows us the date on which the document was last modified, and then modified by, so that we can keep a record of who is making changes to the document, depending on who you've decided to give access to within your company. We also have created on, which tells us when the document was created. Other useful tabs are the download or print button, where you can download a PDF version of the record you've created and either decide to print it or save it to your computer. You can edit an existing document, and this is the way in which you enter an existing record, or you can choose to delete. Alternatively, you can choose to create a new document. Once you click on this button, you'll be prompted to choose a month and a year for which you would wish to create a record. What I'm going to do with you now is enter an existing document. So we'll click on Edit. Now what's going to happen is that we're going to see a spreadsheet load. And within that spreadsheet, we have our salary records that we've created. So within my test company, I have 5 different employees. And I'm going to use the first employee, James Mensah, to show you how I've entered the data into the salary sheet. So as you can see, I have James's last name here, his first name here, his social security number, and his gross salary. I've also entered back pay, because for the month of May, there were 55 cities that I was unable to pay out to him. Therefore, I carried it over to the month of June. What you'll notice is that based on the information that I've entered, I've calculated the SNP employee contribution. This is the total amount that is deducted from James's salary and contributed towards his SNP pension fund. I have my SNP employer contribution, and what this represents is the amount that I'm paying out of pocket to supplement what I'm taking out of James's salary. In other words, the 33 cities comes from me, not from James's salary, and the 14 cities comes from James's salary. The sum of these two amounts is also automatically calculated to give me my total SNP payment. I then have taxable allowances, which I enter. For example, if I give James 20 cities a month towards his phone for company calls, I would record that here because that amount is subject to taxation. I'm going to scroll down and you'll see the horizontal bar, which allows me to move across the sheet. You'll also notice a number of numbers, or a few numbers, at the bottom of the page. These represent totals for the various columns, such as the gross salary column and the SNP contribution column, to give me an idea of how much I'm paying out of each category. So moving back to the top of the page, we can continue working within the spreadsheet. I have taxable income, which shows me the total amount of James's income, which is subject to tax. It shows me the total income tax, which is levied. And again, these two numbers are automatically calculated. I have my reimbursement allowance, and that represents allowances or reimbursements which are not subject to taxation. For example, if I ask James to take a taxi using his money to conduct company business, I must reimburse him the 4 cities that he spent. At the farthest right column, we end up finding the net income, and this again is automatically calculated. The procedure is similar for each of the other 4 employees within the company. So we scroll down to the bottom, and there are a number of other useful tools that we find. We can choose to add rows to the existing salary document in increments of 5, 10, or 20. And then now, we have the 2 most important commands when you're trying to exit a document. First, you must save. And once you've saved, you'll see a message at the top that says the document has been saved successfully. So we're going to wait for that message to appear. So this is the message that we're looking for. And once that message appears, you then scroll down to the bottom and you proceed to close the document. If you have successfully closed the document, you'll notice on the dashboard that it says the document is no longer in use. This is very important. Let's move on to revenues. The revenue dashboard is quite similar to the salaries dashboard in terms of what this table here tells us. So what we're going to do is enter an existing document by clicking on Edit. Again, if you wish to create a new document, you click on Create New, and when prompted, select the appropriate month and year for which you'd like to create a record. So let's enter this document and see what the revenue sheet looks like. Within the revenue sheet, you'll notice that you have the option of choosing different dates. This is important because cash might flow into your business at different dates, and you need to be able to keep an accurate record of exactly when these particular inflows are coming to your business. What you'll notice is that I've entered 3 line items, and I've chosen 3 different dates, of course within the month of June, since this is sales and revenue for June 2011. I've entered the item, the unit price, and the number sold. Automatically, my revenue is calculated, and I also have my VAT, which is a cost borne by the customer. You'll notice that at the bottom of the sheet, I have the total VAT amount. This shows me the total amount which I'm going to have to pay to the VAT authorities. Now here I can enter information on the payment status. I can choose to enter whether or not the item has been paid in full, a 50% deposit has been made, and when the remainder may be collected, etc. Now I'm going to show you something called the subcategory sheet. What this allows us to do is to create extra detail under a particular category of items. It may be appropriate for us to categorize it broadly for the purposes of not cluttering our spreadsheet. So let's click on Sub. And what we'll notice is that we have some other items entered. Since it says Sponges Breakdown for June 2011, I've gone ahead and written down information on different types of sponges. We have our foam bath sponges and our spa pedicure sponges. The unit price for each are listed here, as well as the number sold. Revenue is automatically calculated, the payment status is detailed here, and we have our VAT, so the format is quite similar to the main spreadsheet. The commands are also quite similar. We scroll down to the bottom, we first save, and we wait to be notified that the document has been saved successfully. Once we receive this notification, we again scroll down and then close out of the document to return to the main spreadsheet. Right. So we move here and we scroll down. And what this is going to allow us to do is to close out of this spreadsheet and return to the main one. And what we notice when we return to the main spreadsheet is that all of the data has effectively been carried over. So we see the total amount under sponges. Again, we're not going to see the full amount because we don't want to see the full details of the types of sponges within the main spreadsheet because we don't want to clutter it. But when we do want to go back and either add details to or edit the subcategory that we've created, we click on Sub. And of course, to delete a record, we click on Delete. So scrolling back down again, we will first save the record, and then from there, we will close out of it. So save. We're going to wait for that message, which tells us that the record has successfully been saved. And then we're going to scroll down once more and close out of the document to return us to the main dashboard we were previously using. So we close out now, and we return to the revenues dashboard. Next we have expenses. Now, I'm not going to go through the expenses separately, the reason for that being they're identical to the revenue. The only difference is that revenue represents money coming into your business, where expense represents money coming out. That is money you're spending on behalf of your company. Again, you can enter what the item is, the unit cost of the item, the number that you've purchased, and have the total cost calculated. You have the payment status because you may have an existing arrangement with your supplier, which allows you to break up your payments. You can create subcategories, and you can assign particular dates within a month to each of your different expense records. The next document we'll move on to is the cash flow document. Now, cash flow is an important document because what it does is it shows you the cycle of money within the business. It shows how money flows into and out of the business on a variety of activities, ranging from operational expenditures to investment activities. So what we're going to do is to enter an existing cash flow document. And what you're going to notice is that some of the fields have already been filled. So when we talk about cash received from sales, we find that we have our revenue here. When we talk about cash paid out to suppliers, our expenses have automatically been pulled in. Salaries paid have also been pulled in. Other important items to enter into your cash flow statement are utilities you may be paying, for example, water and electricity, proceeds from the sale of a facility. If you happen to own some factories, for example, and you've sold one or two, the sale price of these items would be relevant to put here. You may have regular maintenance expenses that you incur for the upkeep of your facility. You may have vehicles, which you've either purchased or have to spend money maintaining. There may be other depreciation expenditure tied to your business. If you have monthly rents that you pay for the premises, it would be appropriate to include it here. And if you have any inventory in stock which you have not applied towards any production purposes, you should put that here. What that gives you is the total cash flow. You have your number for cash flow from investments, as well as cash flow from operating activities. At the very bottom, you have your net increase in cash and cash equivalents. So that looks at the number for cash flow from investments, as well as the one from operations. At the beginning of the month, you had a certain amount of cash in hand, as well as in your bank account. List that number here. And what you end up with, a number which is automatically calculated. And this represents your cash and cash equivalents at the end of the month. And it encompasses what you had at the beginning of the month, as well as the net changes that you had over this particular month. So again, we save, and once we receive the message saying that the document has successfully been saved, we scroll down to the bottom again, and we close out of the document. What we're going to do next is look at a balance sheet. What a balance sheet does is it measures the assets and the liabilities that are associated with your business. Let's look at balance sheet data for the month of June. Once you enter the balance sheet, you'll again notice that some numbers have automatically been pulled in. You have the accounts receivable, which is tied to our revenue, and we also have accounts payable, which is tied to our expenses. Again, we have the cash, which we previously entered into the cash flow document, your cash including your bank accounts for this given period. You have any inventory which you may hold in your possession, the value of vehicles that you own, land that you own, any other relevant property that you own, and marketable securities. The marketable securities refer to stocks that your company might hold in other companies. Scrolling down, we look at our liabilities. We have payments on loans which we may hold on behalf of the business, as well as dividends owed to shareholders. This is relevant if you're a publicly traded company. Otherwise, you can ignore it. We end up with our total under both assets and liabilities, and then we have our net assets, which is our assets minus our liabilities. So again, we save, and once we get the appropriate message, we scroll down and close out of the balance sheet document. Finally, we come to the income statement, and most likely for small business owners, this is the most relevant document because it lets you know what your net profit is. So again, we're going to edit an existing document, and what you'll find is that you have your revenue automatically pulled in and your total costs also pulled in, giving you your gross profit. We then have our salaries, which have automatically been pulled in, our rent, which we previously entered, as well as the money that we've spent on maintenance of our facilities. We may have other labor expenses, for example, particular training exercises that we've undertaken. We have the vehicle data that we previously entered, as well as information on utilities. This other column represents miscellaneous administrative costs which have not been accounted for otherwise. We have our depreciation expenditure, which we mentioned previously, and this gives us our operating profit. We may have interest payments on a loan that we've taken out, and those are put here, so that we end up with our operating profit before tax. We have the appropriate effective corporate tax rate, which is levied. We have our VAT, and this is the total sum that was pulled out of our revenue document. This does not come from the money that we've made, but instead is borne by the customer, and as a result, having this column is great because it tells you what money that you're going to be paying out to the VAT authorities. After all of this, we end up with our net profit after tax. We then save, and once we receive the appropriate message, we scroll down and close out of the document. So we've managed to go through each of the individual documents, the salary, the revenue, the expense, the cash flow, the balance sheet, and the income statement. And as you've seen, it's a completely straightforward process. The calculations are built in and up to date to ensure that you're keeping the best records possible. It's important to note, however, that without corresponding information on salary, revenue, and expense, the cash flow, the balance sheet, and the income statement cannot be accurately generated. For example, if you have not entered information for salary, revenue, and expense for the month of June, you will not have that data within your cash flow, balance sheet, and income statement information. That's something very important to keep in mind. As always, if you need help, you can access the help document, or you can get in touch with StartSmart. Shoot us an email at info@startsmartgh.com. That's info at startsmart, startsmartgh.com. Please also make sure that you follow our blog, startsmartgh.blogspot.com. Thanks so much, and we look forward to having you as customers.